What is up, guys, and welcome to this special World Cup qualifier preview episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me as always are Federico Perez, Maria Britos, and Ralph Hanna. And guys, it is finally here. We are all dressed up in Paraguay shirts, all from different generations, all from different years. We obviously know what we're going to be talking about tonight. It is the big matches in the World Cup qualifiers. The games against Uruguay on Thursday, and then next Tuesday against Brazil. I'm excited. I cannot wait to see what you guys think about this matches. Obviously, a ton to talk about. So let's go straight into it. Let's go all the way to the motherland. Fede Perez, how are you, my friend? How are you feeling now? You know, it's finally here. The club season's over. We got international games coming on. I mean, the Roja fever is on, man.
Yeah, obviously, Roberto, it's like that week has come, and I can't believe it, right? Again, we got Roja games after so long. We got to remember, everybody listening to Guarani Vision, that Paraguay was supposed to play a couple of months ago, and they couldn't do it because of the suspension. The games are finally happening now after the long season. This first half of the year is over in Europe. It's over here in South America also, with the Paraguayan League coming to an official ending. Libertad putting that trophy up there of the Apertura. We had the celebration this past weekend. We had the closing games also on Libertadores, on the group stages. Happy about Olimpia, about Cerro Porteño making it to the round of 16, especially with that game that Olimpia had. What a big game that was. Probably one of the best ones, one of the games that you'll probably want to go back to and watch, because I think it was just one of the best games of this Libertadores up until now. And obviously now we have to talk about the national team. We have to talk about Roja, because everything is just coming so fast. Roja has to play against Uruguay at Montevideo, and then we have to play against Brazil. So I'm excited. I want to talk about Berizzo's team. I want to talk about what I would like to see from the Roja also on these two first games, and then we'll talk later on, obviously, about Copa America, because people are already asking us about that. But first, these two games. Let's focus, people.
Yeah, I think obviously we are very decisive in terms of our plans of doing this episode. Not as much as what CONMEBOL is doing with the Copa America, Ralph. So at least we're here discussing it on a Monday night about these two very, very big games against two teams that Paraguay are very familiar with.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, two of their oldest rivals, other than Argentina, it's Uruguay and Brazil that they probably played the most historically. And we'll of course give you guys a few stats of how they've done recently in Montevideo in World Cup qualifiers, and then in Asunción at home to Brazil, because it might be better than some people think, but we'll save that for a bit later. And yeah, just a quick word on, we're leaving club football behind. And while the Apertura has finished, there's still a lot of stuff going on. There's the Women's League is hotting up, by the way. Cerro Porteño are now top, which was a surprise because Libertad y Empeño have failed to win a couple of games. And then, you know, all the Intermedia and the lower divisions is all going on still. So for those people that are like thinking European football has finished, where's my fix? Well, we got the World Cup qualifiers, we got the Copa America, but then you've got all the local league stuff going on. So plenty to follow.
Absolutely. And Maria, I'll go to you last on this one. I mean, you know, it always feels great talking. I mean, obviously, we love talking about what's going on with Olimpia, Cerro, Libertad, you know, women's football going on. But there's just something special when it comes to talking to the national team. I mean, obviously, we've grown up watching Paraguay play in World Cups, Copa Americas, these type of matches. So it always feels great to now think that we're going to go an entire month. Yes, an entire month of Paraguay national team games.
Yeah, it's definitely a special time. Hey guys, how's it going? You know, everyone's excited about going into these international games, you know, Copa America, which is always a great tournament in itself, and this qualifiers that obviously we're super pumped about, and we're super nervous because we have to qualify this time. So everyone's got their eyes on Paraguay, everyone. And you know, like that special feeling that you're talking about, I feel like that's because we're all together. You know, it's not we support Olimpia, we support Cerro, we support Libertad. It's all Paraguay together. So that's what makes it such a magical time. And like you said, I think you tweeted, Roberto, not too long ago, we're in international break mode.
Yes, absolutely.
So
well, Well, tell that to the people on Twitter that always like to debate about Cerro and Olympia. I'm sure they might want that kind of unity for these type of games. So,
Of course.
but let's go straight into it, guys. Obviously, we did see the entire team, or at least are starting to go to Aviroga over there in Impané, obviously training before they travel to their first game in Montevideo against Uruguay. Looking at the team, and we had spoken about it last week about the players that, have come in, have made their that got their first call up. We talked about David Martinez. We talk about Gabriel Avelos. We also see some of the local players, and we had also spoken about these players a few weeks ago as well. We do see the players from Cedro, Olimpia, and from Libertad as well. Some of the names that we are mentioning, we got used to, like Angel Lucena, Matias Villasanti, Santiago Arzamendia, but we do have some new names there as well. We have Alexis Duarte, who I pointed out as probably someone who should be on this list, and he goes on this list. Ralph, you had mentioned the young 17-year-old sensation at Libertad, Julio Enciso. He's also on the list as well. We also see Ryan Ojeda, who's actually, had a good season at Olimpia as well. He's on the list. So it's a mix of a lot of experience, but also a lot of youth. And Fede, I'll go to you on this one first, because you had mentioned that, and I was listening to one of our previous episodes beforehand, that you would like to see a Berizzo side that is a bit more younger. And we're probably seeing that. And I think because of that, it shows that, there's a lot of power. There's a lot of youngsters in Paraguay right now. The fact that Berizzo has called up on these type of players for these important games shows the direction that the team is trying to go into, not just for these games, but possibly even for the Copa America.
I think this is all on Berizzo and his team, on his staff. They've been looking at all the games here in the first league, on the Paraguayan league. Lately, that's been their job mainly these last couple of months. I mean, they haven't been able to travel around and go see other players because of the whole COVID situation. So they've been just sitting here in Paraguay, just studying players, watching videos, and going to the fields, going to the stadiums. They're allowed to do that, and I think this is a demonstration of what they've seen lately. Well, these are the best players: Julio Enciso, Alexis Duarte, Julio, and Brian Ojeda. These are all young players that are coming about and that are asking for a spot also on the national team. I think this is not thinking just about right now. This is thinking also about the future, and this speaks very well of the job that Berizzo is doing, because he's not only thinking about this World Cup, which is what they hired him for. They brought Berizzo to take Paraguay back to the World Cup. That's his big mission. I mean, if he doesn't make that, then I don't know if he's going to stay in the job. But meanwhile, he's seeing all these young players on the national league that can be useful also on the national team. And we've seen some of these players already. You mentioned some of them: Pica Lucena lately, Villasanti also. They've been part of the midfield, of the starting midfield for this Albiroja on these last important games. So why not a spot for a young 17-year-old Julio Enciso? I'm surprised to be calling the ages of some of these guys. I mean, Alexis Duarte, 19. I mean, they have so much ahead of them, and they haven't even left Paraguay yet. And I think this is very important, because this is gonna make them evolve. This is gonna make their game even better. And it just shows that Berizzo is watching everybody, and that everybody's going to get a chance. And even some other players that have more experience, but they play in the local league, that have also been called, Roberto, like Antonio Barreiro. We haven't seen this name in a while. We hadn't seen that name with this coach, and that's a very experienced player. That's a player we talked about on this podcast also. And we don't have that many players that can play wide on the right side right now on the national team, and he's a very special player. He can head you a ball straight to the net, and he can do a lot of damage with his quickness, also spread out wide. I mean, this team has everything. Berizzo can play as many ways as he wants. That's why he's bringing in and mixing so many players around. I'm just really happy, and props to Berizzo. I was actually surprised by some of these names. I didn't think they were going to get called up for these particular two games, maybe for the Copa America, but put them on these two big games, and maybe even having some playing game, I would be shocked, to be honest.
It's a huge jump for the players, because traditionally someone like Alexis Duarte or Julio Enciso would have played in January the Sudamericano, which is like the South American Championship for under 20s or for under 17s. They usually play at the beginning of the year. But obviously, because of the pandemic, all of this got cancelled. there has been no youth football. So that's also why somebody like Enciso got thrown into the Libertad first team, because otherwise he wouldn't have played. You know, when he made his debut, I think in September or something, or October in the Libertadores of last year. But it's just because is this kid, you either have to play him now or he doesn't do anything because there's no youth football going on. So it's a big jump for them to come, you know, they're probably their first time with some of these players. In fact, I saw Julio Enciso on his Instagram. He had a photo with Fabian Balbuena, who's just come over from West Ham. And it's because for him, it's like, wow, you know, this is a player I look up to, and he probably hasn't met before, you know, in the national team. And then we have another new player that, in the River Plate defender that's been called up, Martinez, because he's coming for the first time as well. And he probably doesn't know a lot of these players because, you know, he's a player that's played most of his football over in Argentina. So Berizzo has that task of gelling together some of these new names and new players as well. And I don't know about you guys, but what I'm really focused on is the defense. And what does he do? Because the first game, at least against Uruguay, you got to think, you know, it's Luis Suarez, it's Uruguay. That last time we went to Montevideo, they won 4-0, or, you know, Paraguay lost 4-0. And so then he has a team. He can essentially play a team of 4 center backs, in that he has people like Juan Escobar or Junior Alonso that can play as fullbacks, but they're also very good center backs. And I don't know about you guys, but I think we might see a team without Azamendi, without Beto Espinola. It's going to be a team of kind of, it's a back 4, but it's like center backs and very big aerial players as he looks to try and keep it defensive. I don't know what you guys think of his strategy for this first game.
I mean,
Sorry, I couldn't hear you there, but I agree with you, Ralph, there. You know, Paraguay is very well known for their defensive play, style of play, but lately we've seen that change a little bit. Last year with Berizzo, you know, he wants to go more forward. He wanted to play more attacking football, but it also depends on the team. And you know, Uruguay and Brazil are very attacking teams themselves, so they are going to have to step up on their defense. And what, like you said, Ralph, you know, having a big group in the back would really help them. I don't think they'll have a problem in that sense, because I know that they have a good defensive style of play overall. And what I think that they should focus on a lot as well is try to get 1 or 2 goals, you know, at least make that impact on the other team, so that we can have a balance in the game.
absolutely. I think that's the crucial part, really. And I think looking at all the games that we had played so far, and obviously, you know, getting the 3 draws and, you know, conceding goals against Bolivia, conceding goals against Peru and Argentina, you look at the defensive mistakes that have gone. I think Berizzo has now looked at that and say, okay, this cannot happen again. We need to have a solid defense. And Fede, I think you can understand that, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, but he is looking for alternatives. I mean, bringing in David Martinez brings you an option over there. You got Alexis Duarte, a young name over there. Also, you got Omar Alderete, who had his first season in Bundesliga in Germany. You got Fabian Balbuena, that's been playing a lot also this last season, and will probably change up teams to try to get more playing game over there. You got Juan Escobar, who was just champion in Mexico with Cruz Azul. And he was playing over there all the games. I mean, you got a lot of players. You just have to get it right on the names, and that's what probably hasn't happened. And you got to get the best out of these guys also. I mean, we should have seen the best out of Gustavo Gomez, and we didn't see that. I think we did get the best out of Junior Alonso, and I think we got a player there to maintain. But Gustavo's going to have to show up, and on these kind of big matches, even more, you know, when you have to go against the big stars of the other teams like Luis Suarez, this is where Gustavo Gomez is going to have to really show that he can stop these big players, because that's what you're going to have to do in the World Cup also. And then I'm not with Rob's idea of playing center backs on the sides. I would love to see at least one of the 2 sides with an attacking player. Like Espinola, I don't think it was the best semester for Santiago Arzamendia, but he has played so well in the national team. but I do see David Martinez getting a chance. I mean, that wouldn't be the first time that Berizzo brings in a player and puts him right away, right? Just talking about the defense, I don't want to move on the team before everybody give their opinion.
No, I
Yeah.
agree. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, I think it's what he did. We saw with the first game against Venezuela, like Gaston Jimenez and Puas, he put them in. He's like, okay, these are my players. And so we might see this with David Martinez in defense. And I think it would be for Valbuena, because Valbuena, what we saw is he started to miss a lot of games towards the end of the season with West Ham. Just as West Ham were playing better, he wasn't part of maybe that, that improved performance. And I don't think he will drop Gomez, even though Gomez has maybe not played well. He's the captain, he's the leader. He's playing really well for Palmeiras. I mean, that's always the thing with us. I just watched him at the weekend. They're playing against Flamengo, which is, one of the best teams in Brazil. He had a great game. So we're hoping, he can keep that level. And I think we'll see him with Martinez there, and maybe Junior Alonso left back. Remember, that's who he played at left back against Argentina, when again he was going for a more defensive style. Because in all Paraguay's games, if we just look back in the World Cup qualifiers under Berizzo, Paraguay always dominated possession, except the game against Argentina, which he put a totally different, kind of style out, knowing about the dangers of Messi, knowing about the dangers of Argentina, and it kind of worked. We got the draw and we played well in that game. So I think we might see those three, and then the doubt for me is over the right back. If he goes to someone like Juan Escobar, but remember, Juan Escobar was playing last night in Cruz Azul, and the game's on Thursday. I mean, these players are coming. This has all come so quick for the players as well, as something to remember. And they've kind of trickled through to Upane, to the high performance centers. Like, he had 10 players, then he had 12, then he had 20. He still doesn't have the full group as of today, because Escobar, I don't think, is trained yet. So, I mean, it's interesting. He will maybe be thinking about that, about fatigue after such a long season.
And I think in such an important game like this, it'll be very important to see how well these fitness levels are. Maria, we want to switch gears as well as to what's going to be in the midfield, because we have seen a lot of different midfielders on this team. We saw Gaston Jimenez, who, he scored against Venezuela, but kind of had a bit of a more disappointing performances in the other games. Cuas as well. I think looking at the return, and Fede, you had mentioned why you were so happy about this, is the return of Piris da Mota, a player that I think would be very crucial as, kind of that destroyer, that kind of, ball winning midfielder that can, obviously track back and set up defenses and go forward as well. I think in a game like this, when you're looking at Uruguay and Brazil, who are going to go right at you, you're going to need that. And I think you could still have players like Richard Sanchez. And then the question is, how do you formulate on the attack? How do you go on? I think Miggy obviously is probably going to be the one that's up there. You're probably going to see him complement with Angel Romero as well. But then who do you got? Who would you want on that team that I feel is going to get you the goals and want to move forward on the attack?
Well, yeah, that's the difficult part in this whole situation for Berizzo, because he's got so many players too, that he's got to make he's got to make it work, with all these players, see which one fits the best. And we saw in the midfield last time, in the last two games that Paraguay had, we had Richard Sanchez, who had pretty good game, and like you said, Gaston Jimenez, who also had a good one good game. We also had Lucena, who he was decent as well, and I think that could stay the same in my opinion. But what's really should be worked on is the front. Miguel Almiron. We don't have Sanabria anymore, but he didn't really make a difference last time. We have Oscar and Angel Romero. So there's a lot of options there for him. I think the midfield could really stay the same, maybe switch one or two. But in my opinion, I think in that sense, last time around, they had a good midfield.
Absolutely. And, I think to close it out, guys, I mean, I'll go to Fed on this one. I mean, who should get the goals? Who are we looking at to see who is going to complement the likes of Miguel and Angel? I mean, we see, I think Avalos is probably the one that you kind of want in terms of form because of what he's doing in Argentina in the Copa Libertadores. Gonzalez as well, Charlie Gonzalez from Tigres, he's not had the best start so far to his career, but he is a proven goal scorer as well. I mean, who do you see that should indeed be on the attack and be that front player?
Well, first of all, I was thinking about what you were saying, Roberto. I mean, this is a very important time of the year for some players. I mean, it was the ending of the season for the European players, the players that play abroad. So I don't know physically just how good they are. If they are a little tired, some of them have come to after playing very important games for their teams. I mean, playing relegation points, some playing for other important stuff also. But I think that's key for the coaching staff to, before this 2 games, to have like that clinical eye and see who is 100%. I mean, it's been so long since the last time we saw this team that I don't know if Berizzo is going to try to surprise us also, or surprise the other coaches, I would say, because of the strategy. I mean, you're going up against 2 of the best coaches in South America, in my opinion. I mean, Oscar Tavares knows just so much about Uruguayan football and has beaten us so badly lately. And we need a strategy behind that. And then we got Tite. We got one of the best coaches that Brazil has thrown us lately, and he's just been awesome ever since he got that national team. So I'm kind of scared against, Berizzo making mistakes again and not picking the right players, or going with the same team on both games, which is something that he has done before in combos that we've seen from him. So based on all of that, I don't think, if I have to throw a team out there just basing myself on what I've seen from him, I do think Gaston Jimenez is going to be there again, because he's been there all these 4 games and he's been an important player for him. But then you got players like Matias Vitasanti, Angel Lucena, who have come in very well to this team. But it depends a lot on the season that they've had. And Andres Cubas played a lot in France also, so he might get a chance in that midfield. And then you got more defensive style players. Andres Cubas is kind of a midfielder that gives you that defense, but you have other players like Jorge Morel, Robert Pires da Mota. They can be very aggressive in that midfield, and we kind of need that. And then you look at that right side. I don't see that many options on the right side or on the left side on the midfield. I mean, on the left side, it's either Gaston Jimenez or Caco Romero. I don't know if you guys have another player that can play in that left field. Maybe Oscar Romero, another one. But I see Oscar Romero more on the on Miguel Almiron's spot, but maybe replacing him. I think these are players that are going up against each other to have a chance in Berizzo's style of play, because Berizzo plays 4-3-3, and you got to find your players around that, because he hasn't been that much flexible around that situation either. I mean, we hear it all the time. Maybe we play with 2 defensive midfielders, but we haven't seen that from him. I mean, mainly on the speech, I base myself. I think up there we're going to see Miguel Almiron. We're going to see Angel Romero. They deserve it. They need to be on that starting team. And then that last spot is open. I mean, who's going to be the center forward? It's either going to be Carlos Gonzalez or Gabriel Avalos. There are no more options than that. I think one of those 2 players are going to get their big shot at this national team because of some injuries. Tony Sanabria is not here. Lescano's not here. So that spot is open, wide open for one of these 2 guys to come in and maybe score just 1 goal on these 2 games and blow everybody away, because that could happen in tight games. And maybe they can be the hero that Paraguay might need in these 2 very tough matches. Probably the worst combo that you can get looking at strong teams, Uruguay and Brazil. I mean, respect to them. We got to watch out for them.
Yeah, it's a really tough call for the strikers. I'm the same with Fede. I mean, he's played Lescano in almost every game. I think 1 game he dropped him for Sanabria, but he always plays with that kind of 9. Because there is the other option, if you put Angel Romero in the middle, I mean, it wouldn't be crazy. But looking at the way he's played before, I think he's going to want Almiron, Romero, and then like a more traditional 9 in the middle. So it's between Avalos and Gonzalez. And it might even be a case of who has the most energy, you start, and then the other person comes on as the first change around 60 minutes. I don't know who I prefer, because I would say probably, on balance, Gonzalez is a better player than Avalos, I would say, but on form, Avalos is playing better than Gonzalez right now. So it's kind of, do you go with the guy who's hot at the moment, or do you go with the guy that maybe, has more chance or has scored in bigger games before? So it's a tough one. I don't know if I could call it.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're thankful that we're not in Berizzo's shoes for this one, because I would be stressed out as well. But yeah, I think, and now heading into obviously our opponents, they are very tough. And Ralph, will go to you on this one. Uruguay is the first game in Uruguay at the Estadio Centenario in Montevideo. We look at the historical factor. Obviously, two teams that are very similar to each other, but they also have a team that have been stuck together for quite some time. You had mentioned, Fede, they have Oscar Tavares and Maestro, as we say over there in South America. He's been on that team for 15 years. He knows these players. He knows the opponents very well. But for Paraguay's case, it has been quite unlucky, I would say. Their last win in Montevideo happened in 2001. If we look at the record real quick, 7 games, 2 wins, 4 losses, and only 1 draw. So historically saying, this does not work well for Paraguay, Ralph, at least for this game against Uruguay. So I'm just curious, how do you feel as if though they should set up for this game? Because, we talk about the likes of Luis Suarez. We talk about the likes of, Cavani. He's not going to be there. Obviously has had a great season at Manchester United. He's not there, but you still have dangerous players like Federico Valverde. You've got players like Lucas Torreira. Your defense is obviously going to be the likes of Godin and Jimenez, 2 great center backs that know each other, Muslera in goal. So this is a team that definitely know what they're going to be like, because they have always been this way for many years now.
Yeah, it's a really strong team. It's a team that kind of picks itself, as you mentioned. I don't think there'll be too many surprises, except for we have to see who will replace Cavani, because Cavani is suspended, which is actually really good news for Paraguay. The last time they played in Montevideo, they lost 4-0, and Cavani scored 1 and he assisted 1. And when Cavani scored, Luis Suarez set him up, and when Cavani assisted 1, he was assisting Luis Suarez. I mean, that combination is so good. And I remember that day they were just too quick for Paraguay. This was a long time ago. Let me just check. Yeah, 2016. So we're 5 years back. But Paraguay were playing that day with like Paulo da Silva in defense, and I think they had people like Cristian Riveros in midfield. Topo Cáceres, I think he had
a changed team. It's a very changed team now.
Yeah, I mean, and it was even at that time 5 years ago, that was a kind of older and slower team, and they couldn't cope with some of the rhythm and the tempo of Uruguay. Sorry. So I think that Albiroca will, they'll kind of know what to expect as well from this Uruguayan team. That's going to be quick, going to look for balls into the channels, in that space between the fullbacks and the centre backs, which is again going back to my point of why that position, those fullbacks are going to be so important, because Suarez has that habit of sometimes he loves to pull off into those channels, which he can do to if he's playing in a 2 up front, which he probably will. So I mean, yeah, Uruguay, it's going to be a very tough team, and also Uruguayan football traditionally is very physical. It's very physical, very kind of. What's the word? It's garra. It's very similar to Paraguay. So it will be a tough game out there. It's like Fede says, a really difficult combo, because your first game's they're going to be really tired. You get this really tough physical team that you have to play against, travel to, and then they come back to play Brazil. So it's a really tough one to go into. And I think what we'll see with Uruguay is trying to control more the ball, have more possession, and really, try and stretch Paraguay. I think that's what we'll see. Playing quickly, they're going to try and stretch Paraguay. It just reminds me when we talked a little bit here about Cerro and Olimpia, when they suffered in Brazil in the games against Internacional and Mineiro. It was that thing of the tempo was so quick for the teams that they weren't used to it. And we've seen this before at international level. So that could be something to watch out for. And maybe part of the plan is the traditional, when you go and play away, is just to get stuck in and cut the game up with fouls, which is kind of what they did against Argentina, and it ended up working.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Fede, I'll go to you on this one. Do you feel that that might be the right approach to go to heading into this game? Try to, because obviously this is a Berizzo side that love to play in possession. They love to obviously be quick, but now we kind of saw in those games that they do kind of tire out a bit. But so do you feel as if though maybe they should get rid of that and just go all the way back and hope for a counter and get that tight, sloppy win if they have to?
I think this team is actually going to feel really comfortable in this match playing on the counter attack. And I think this is where Miguel Almiron can make some damage, where Angel Romero can make some damage. The fast players on the Paraguayan team can make the difference on this game, I believe, attacking that defense of Uruguay. But we're going to have to be very strong back there. Anthony Silva, who will probably start in the goalkeeper. We haven't talked about that position in particular, but I think he's going to have two very good games. I mean, he needs it to really confirm himself in that spot right now, and that he's going to be the goalkeeper from now on, because the goalkeeper that was there before, Fernandez, Gatito Fernandez, unfortunately, Roberto Fernandez has not been available in many months now, and his injury just got worse and worse. So right now he's not in the plan. So we need a strong goalkeeper in these kind of games. And I think Anthony Silva has the experience, and he's going to have a big game. Like we talked about the defense also. So that's the kind of game that I'm imagining. That's why I think bringing in faster players, maybe later on in the game, like Antonio Barreiro, that's
What
something.
about what about?
Yes.
And this is just a name, and Ralph, I'm sure you're gonna like this one. What about someone like Enciso?
Yeah, that's the names that I'm talking about. That maybe you can throw in that second half that might surprise the other team. You need to throw a curveball at these coaches. You need to throw something that they're not expecting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Maria, I'll go to you on this one as well. I mean, I think you look at how, obviously we know what Uruguay's going to be at, but, I just want to make sure you agree on this. And this is like something that Paraguay might need to do, just looking at the way that their team is set up, that they need to just be as strong and physical and try to hope to go on a counter. And if they need that goal and, they can get it from a super sub like Enciso or someone else, that's the way to victory if they need to go for that.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely going to be very physical, like you guys are saying. And now that I'm looking at this Uruguay team, they're very young. So you're going to see, an already fast team more upbeat, trying to get the goals, and Paraguay's going to have to play catch up. So they're going to have to be, I think, I'm not going to say my prediction yet, but it's going to be a very tight game, a very same level kind of game. I think you guys mentioned that already. So yeah, they're going to have to put it all out there, because they are not just young, they're also huge guys, so huge players, physically, like you guys were saying. So we're going to need the younger players as well. We're going to need players that can play long enough, can go out there and make those runs. I know we know Miguel Almiron likes to run, so he's gonna do that. But yeah, and Ciso is one of those as well. So if he comes in as a sub and pushes through, and can surprise the Uruguay team. But yeah, it's gonna be a fun game. I predict that. So we'll see.
I mean, yeah, it almost feels like, these are teams that we know. And certainly, Ralph, like you said, I think we'll learn from our lessons of what happened in Montevideo a couple years ago. This is a different side. This team is much more expansive, much more rapid. They can indeed hold on. And I think in these big games is what we've seen from Berizzo, like so Brazil, Argentina, they like to invite that pressure. They'd like to go forward. And this is now a perfect segue into the other opponent that will be on Tuesday in Asuncion. It is the five-time world champions, Brazil. They will go into this game, and quite a similar record, actually, when you look at it, Ralph. Brazil and Paraguay are two teams that have always played against each other, a team that, at least in recent times, has given them a big push. Obviously we talk about the Copa Americas, the last 3 of them going into the penalty shootouts, Paraguay pushing them into the brink, winning 2 of those last 3. But even looking at the qualifiers, they have not lost a single home World Cup qualifier to Brazil since 1985. Yes, it's been 4 games, but when you're playing against one of the best teams of all time, or at least, a traditional powerhouse like Brazil, that's a good record against Paraguay. I mean, so I'm curious to see what you feel about this game in particular. Obviously, they won't be without the likes of Thiago Silva and Dani Alves, very experienced defenders, but I mean, come on, you look at the list that they have: Neymar, Gabriel Jesus, Firmino. They got Gabigol that's doing well at Flamengo, Vinicius Jr. Look at the midfield: Casemiro, Fabinho as well. Even in the defense, Marquinhos. Yeah, the list goes on and on and on. How do you think Paraguay will set up for this game against Brazil?
It's such a tough team again. Yeah. So on the back of Uruguay, they'll be back and have to try and keep up this record, which I'm sure a lot of the players know about. I mean, I was checking, I went to the 2 draws you mentioned. So 2004 was a 0-0 draw. And that was when Brazil came with an incredible team. They came with Ronaldo, they came with Ronaldinho, Roberto Carlos. I think Adriano was in that team. They just came and Paraguay somehow held out to a 0-0 after like a 30-minute blackout. The stadium lights went out early on. It was one of those classic games. And just a reminder, I will never forget this, that Ronaldo got the ball for the first time on like the edge of the box, and the whole crowd, because of course this was a packed crowd, went like everyone drew breath, like they were like, oh my gosh, it's Ronaldo. But they held on and they got the draw there. And then the 2-2 is the most recent game, which I was also at, and I'm very pleased that Alves is out injured, because Alves destroyed Paraguay towards the end of that game. Paraguay were leading 2-0. Lescano got the first goal, I remember. And then, they brought on, this was under Ramon Diaz, they brought on Iturbe on the left. He didn't do very well marking, and Alves kind of had his number. And I think he set up the first goal and then scored the equalizer. So that's a reminder of the danger of Brazil. Even we were leading 2-0 in that game, and we couldn't take the win. I think for this one, it's going to be, I would say, a similar setup to what we'll see against Argentina, Uruguay, because it's hard to beat a Tite team in possession. I mean, he's so good at building those teams up to get possession. They can play this really slow, patient build up. They don't get easily caught on the counterattack, so it's very difficult. And a quick note about Brazil is Casemiro, I don't think has ever lost a World Cup qualifier since he and Tite have been together. So it's going to be, that's a really tough one. And again, I think, Paraguay, similar to the Montevideo game against Uruguay, they'll be happy with a draw. Remember, as we go into these games, Paraguay are in the qualification spots. And if they come out of this unbeaten, they could still be hanging around there. So I don't think we'll see like a total change from what we're going to have in the Uruguay game. And Fede was mentioning, we've seen sometimes he keeps the same players in both combos. I think he did it for like Peru, Venezuela towards the beginning, right? It was almost the same teams. And so I think we might see something like that. And that's what's going to help Paraguay as we're talking about these new players coming together. Maybe they'll be stronger in the second game against Brazil, having spent more time on the pitch together. So yeah, that's what I'm expecting. Something quite similar, and I think more of that, not having so much of the ball, because trying to beat this Brazil team in possession is going to be, it would be very difficult. So I think we'll see something similar.
Yeah, Fede, and I want to go with you on this one, because I think obviously the main player that they have to focus on is someone like Neymar. And we know what Neymar is capable of doing. Yes, he can be petulant at times when it comes to the diving and simulating. We understand that, but he is still on his day one of the best in the world. So how do we stop someone like him? And even then, they still have the likes of, come on, 2 world-class goalkeepers in Alisson and Ederson, and there. Obviously we think Alisson's going to be in the goal, but they still have the likes of someone like Richarlison, Everton. Obviously, we are familiar with this team, having played them literally almost 2 years ago. So Berizzo probably has that kind of game in mind. Do we see a similar thing happening? Where everything is just going to have to go back. But when you're playing at home, you got to go for the win at this point because they can't drop points in a situation like this, no matter who the opponent is.
Yeah, it could be very important the first game against Uruguay, just the result, just to see how you're going to play that second match, right? I mean, you're going to repeat the team, you're going to repeat most of the names if they have a good game against Uruguay. It'll be easier to do that, to put in practically the same team, like Ralph was saying. If that doesn't happen, and if you end up losing in Montevideo, and you have to go after Brazil, and you have to look, and you have to try to win at home, it's a totally different situation. But you are going to have to stop all these great players. And I'm not actually that much worried because Junior Alonso, Gustavo Gomez, we have so much players that have the Brazilian experience, that they play lately against Brazilian players. Fabian Balbuena, even, that's in West Ham right now. I mean, so much time in Corinthians. And then we have players that have recently played against Brazilian teams. Maybe they didn't do so well, Olimpia and Cerro Porteño. But there are a lot of players that are on those teams that are also on the national team. And I do think that the experience of playing against these kind of players, playing against Tite's team is very important. And I do think most of the players that we're going to see against Brazil are probably going to be those players that have the experience. But I just want to throw my prediction already out there because it has a lot to do with what we're saying. And I'd be happy if we get 2 draws really in this combo, in these 2 games. I would be happy. But since I always go a little bit higher than that, I'm going to go with a win in one of these 2 games. So instead of 2 points, I'm going to ask for 3 points in these 2 games. And then I'll be even happier. So I'm going to go with we win one of these 2 matches. Which one of them?
No, go for it. Then. No. Come on. You got to pick one. If you had to choose one, what would it be then?
I'd rather beat Brazil. That would be headlines of the world because this team is the strongest team in South America right now.
I mean, it'd be great. And yeah, I guess, well, let's go into the segue, guys. I mean, we've already made the predictions, or at least Fede did, going for that draw and the win against Brazil in Asunción. Maria, I mean, we know these opponents. These guys are obviously 2 powerhouses of world soccer. Tight games, when you look at it, Fede, I think brings up a good point. I think it's probably the hardest combo that Paraguay can have right now, obviously before the Copa America, and then looking at what's ahead. How do you see Paraguay getting these 2 results in Montevideo and then all the way in Asunción a few days later?
Well, I guess I'm going to have to go with a draw with Uruguay and a win with Brazil as well. And I think that this Brazil game is going to be a late winner. There's going to be a late goal in this game, and hopefully it's from Paraguay.
I love the simplicity. I think we're all being optimistic. I don't know. I won't get my prediction yet, but maybe Ralph can help me out a bit because maybe it could be a bit more cautious looking into these 2 games. I mean, we know the history. We know what it's like to play against these guys. These guys will step it up in a game like this. How do you see this happening?
Yeah, I don't know if I can go for 4 points from these 2 games, but that would be amazing. I think I agree with the draw in Uruguay, and I think they can get a draw against Brazil. So I think they can go through this unbeaten. A quick thing, I was just checking my notes as we were talking. Neymar didn't play in the last qualifier in Paraguay. It was when Dunga was manager. It's a very strange team he put out. So I think this will be Neymar's first trip to Paraguay since 2011 Copa Libertadores semi-final 3-3 against Cerro Porteño, which was an incredible game for those that remember it. A very heartbreaking game for Cerro in Libertadores as usual. But that's amazing to think Neymar will be back in Paraguay after 10 years. And, what a different player when he was at Santos in the Copa America semi-final, Copa Libertadores semi-final. He's like this new kid on the block, amazing player. And now, of course, it's a totally different story. So that would be interesting.
Who's friends with Neymar, and we've seen pictures of them together. Gustavo Gomez. They've been partying together. They've been hanging out around.
That's true.
Maybe he knows a couple of things about Neymar.
Let's hope he's got his number for that game. But yeah, for predictions, I'm gonna go with 2 draws, and I wouldn't be surprised if one of these draws is a 0-0.
I think they are very tight games. I was thinking about it a few days ago. For some reason, I look at the recent history that Paraguay's had. I was going for a loss for the game against Uruguay, but I will not go for that. I think this Paraguay side is very different to what we saw against Uruguay many years ago. I think looking at Uruguay as a whole, they are beatable. And we saw that in the games against, it was Brazil, but, they lost to Ecuador. Okay, it was in Quito, so there's an advantage, but they are beatable. These guys are not, some big powerhouse. And then I'll talk about Brazil in a bit, but I think I'm going to have to side with Ralph here. I think it's going to be very difficult to see Paraguay get a win in Montevideo. It would be huge. It'd be absolutely huge if they get it, but I think I'm going to opt for a 1-1 draw on this one. Against Brazil, I think these guys understand that, they have that history. They're going to come out, and I think they can even feel confident coming out of that game against Uruguay. I mean, snatching a result away from home is huge for any team, and they need to get the maximum points at home. But I just think that, Ralph, you had mentioned it, this team is, too good in possession. How are they going to be able to break through? It's going to be very difficult. I think Paraguay will have to really set back. And I think because of that, I think they will go out of Paraguay unbeaten, but with a 0-0 draw on this one. So I'm going to say 2 points on this one, which means that Paraguay are still unbeaten after 6 games playing a World Cup qualification. But if I do have to choose a game that if they were going to win this one, I think it's Brazil, because, I mean, come on, you want to continue history, so keep going and let's go for the win. Hell yeah, why not? And like Fede said, that would kind of shock the world if they're able to beat a Chichi side that doesn't lose a lot, actually, when you think about it.
I just wanted to end up with this because of the situation of the pandemic, Roberto, and the switch on the calendar. The 2 games that weren't played before that will be played after Copa America makes everything so tight. I mean, we're gonna have so many games after Copa America and the beginning of next year. Those are gonna be the decisive months. I mean, those are gonna be one game after the other, and then we'll probably know already who's gonna go to the next World Cup.
Definitely. And I think even then that, as we've seen, World Cup qualifiers aren't over during this time of period. They still have to play 12 more games after this. So it's going to go a long path. I'm not saying that if Paraguay comes out of this with 0 points, they're going to say, okay, the World Cup's done. No, far from that. Just like if they get 6 points, they get 4 points, 2 points, 0 points. No, their World Cup journey is not over. It might be easier, might be difficult depending on how they come, but it's definitely not over. So I think we should all feel optimistic. I think this is obviously the perfect test to come, especially now heading into the Copa America that we will talk about in future episodes. So stay tuned for that. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I think we all need to feel confident in Paraguay as always, that kind of pressure, that's always great. And always that great feeling of seeing your national team play, especially against these type of opponents, former world champions. History is on themselves. I can't wait for this one. So I'm really excited. So guys, again, another great episode, another great World Cup qualifier preview episode that we do for Guarani Vision, as we've done. This is our 3rd one that we've done so far since we start the show, and it's been great so far. So for myself, Roberto Rojas, for Fede Perez, Maria Britos, and Ralph Hanna, thank you so much for listening to this new preview episode of the World Cup qualifiers against Uruguay and Brazil. See you soon.